In today's episode, I wanted to talk to you about our harvest and how we fared during the drought and the heat wave of July and August. And because of all that dry weather, our harvest came very early, a couple of weeks earlier than normal, and finished early. I've never known harvest being finished by the middle of August. Quite extraordinary, really. But actually, our crops fared reasonably well. You'll see now, the crops have all disappeared and all gone. But it was the hottest July and August I've ever known. And a few weeks ago, during that heat, I was up in Merseyside, meeting up with farmer and YouTuber Olly Harrison. Today I've travelled up the M5, up the M6 to Merseyside to meet farmer and YouTuber Olly Harrison. And he's just sorting a few things out with his trailer over there, getting his combine sorted because he's in the middle of harvesting his wheat. And he's getting on really well. It's a blisteringly hot day. I'll just give you a little guided tour of this area because it's absolutely stunning. So he farms on this Cheshire Merseyside border, and over here you can see that lovely lighthouse in the distance, and then there's the River Mersey. Wind turbines spinning in the background because there's a gentle breeze, factories on the other side, and it is a huge part of the river here. It's tidal, so salty water, and then you can see the tide is out, the mud flats are showing, and there's quite a few wading birds flying around out there. And then just in the distance, I don't know whether you can see that, is a control tower of Liverpool Airport. So very close to Liverpool here, but some very productive agricultural land. They grow wheat, barley, a few of the farmers around here are growing potatoes. And I've come to catch up with Olly, see how he's getting on. And here he is. How you doing?
Good, you all right?
Yeah, very well. So Olly, tell me about harvest, how's it all going?
Well, it was flat out, then we had 10 days of patchy weather, and then we're flat out again now before it rains again.
And yields?
Disappointing.
Okay.
Yeah, we never got that rain in June, and then we got them really high temperatures early July. I think we had a 27.9 degrees, which is unusual. Everything just switched off, that was it.
And you just swapped with your mate who's going to now drive the combine. How much practical work do you do on the farm? Are you mainly manager?
As much as I can. I mean, we've not got enough staff normally, so you can run it, you can manage everything from a mobile phone, can't you? So I must admit, I did back the combine into something that knocked the plastic spout off the other day because I was on the phone. But you just need to keep going.
And you're a big YouTuber as well, you're all over that.
Yeah, no, it started as a joke at the beginning of the lockdown. I did a video and it just went on from there. 870 odd days in we are now.
Amazing, are you enjoying it?
Yeah, so far, yeah.
And doing it because it's important to sort of tell the story of farming?
Yeah, so I started doing it so that we could see what the people are doing on farms. I mean, the very first day I did actually with the BBC for the local news, like a little bit of an update. We had a wet winter and we just got drilling, and people enjoyed watching it when I put it on YouTube. So the next day, as a joke, I just pulled my phone out of my pocket and did another video. And then it just sort of snowballed, and then a couple of teachers wanted to borrow the footage for the kids because they were doing online learning. So then I was like sending these videos to people through WhatsApp, but they were too long. So I thought, I'll just put them on YouTube and tell people where the links are, and then it just went on and on and on, and then now it pays. So I've been using it to buy classic tractors.
Is that your hobby?
Yeah. So the first thing I bought, my first YouTube purchase, was paying the finance on a new sprayer, and now collecting classic tractors.
And would you recommend it to other farmers then, to get out there and tell people what they're up to?
Yeah. There's been this huge disconnect going back generations. Everyone was related to a farmer or knew one, and there's generations now that have never known anyone that's worked on a farm or be related to a farmer or anything like that, right across the globe. So I think it's important that we do it, and the videos can get watched across the globe on YouTube.
And food is so accessible in the supermarket, isn't it? You know, there is this big disconnect because we can just pick up whatever we want, whenever we want. Seasonality is all gone, and people just don't understand generally where their food comes from.
That's it, and food production, you can't turn it on and off. You know, everything has at least mostly a 12-month growing season, so we've got to keep going, because we've got oilseed rape that's been in the ground for 2 weeks now. We won't harvest that till next August. We don't know what it's going to be worth either, and that will make your cooking oil and your fuel.
Yeah, great. Oh well, it'd be great to have a little look around.
Yeah, we'll see the classic tractors as well.
So tell me, what is this? Claas Lexion?
8700. We got it last year. I wanted to buy a new combine before it was 40. I'd always bought second-hand ones, and I managed to buy one last year.
Brilliant. It's a monster, isn't it? So the header, the bit on the front.
What size is that? That's 41 foot, so 12.3 metres. So we run it at 12 metres for controlled traffic farming. 3 12-metre passes for 36 metres per hour. We have a 12-metre drill as well.
So controlled traffic truck farming is when you only run on the same place, so the tram line's going up and down the field, which is why you've got that great extension on the unloading span.
Yeah, so across the order has to be at least 12 metres to reach to the trailer when we're emptying. So you'll see that in a minute when we're going to the field.
Absolutely brilliant. How long have you been farming here?
Well, all my life.
Your dad had it before you?
Yeah, the field we're in at the moment though, I've just contract cutting it for the neighbour. So we do all his combining, and that's why we can have a big combine, we run it together.
So Ollie, the header here, the front bit of the combine, this is where the crop is cut. Just tell me what's so special about this one.
So this is what's called a flex header, so it's made of rubber rather than metal, and it's a conveyor belt that carries it to the middle, a bit like where you pick your suitcase up off. But the idea of that is, because the head is so wide, the ground isn't always flat, so it can flex. These are like piano keys, these pivot points, and there's 12 of them across the combine, and you can control the pressure in them, and that's what helps the bed float along the floor. So they're like doing that all the time, and you can even run it, so it's just the weight of the knife is touching the floor, and as it goes along it'll skim the ground, really get underneath flat crops.
And then Ollie, you've got wheels on it as well.
Yeah, so this just helps it because it's so wide. It just gives it a bit of stability. If you were to go down a real bad hump, it reacts and pick itself up on the wheels. The idea is if you've got flat crops or peas or things that grow low down, or maybe even beans that pod low, you can get right underneath them all and follow the contours of the ground.
So as the crop comes in, it's pushed in by these fingers, chopped onto the knife, and then onto this conveyor belt where it goes down to the middle of the combine. This auger is what most combines use to bring the grain to the centre, but on this very long, wide header, they use this conveyor belt. This is used for oilseed rape. So Ollie is driving his Claas Lexion combine, unloading at the moment, this winter wheat. We've just drifted over to the tractors. Now, here we are, vintage tractors. This is a monster. When I think of vintage tractors, I think of little tiny Massey 35s, but look at this brute. What's this all about?
Well, I'm a bit younger, you see, so to me, a vintage tractor or a classic tractor has a cab on it. So this is my collection of classic tractors with cabs on.
Goodness me. And that is a Case
4494. So this is actually never sold in the UK. It's been imported from Sweden by a collector before I bought it. They're its original tyres, despite it being 35 years old. They lived on a peat box, so they never wore.
Incredible.
So 1987.
And then next door, another Case. You're obviously a bit of a Case fan.
Well, that's what we had when I was younger, and I always wanted a 1455, and my friend used to have one that took his life, and I just was determined to buy one, so this is what it is. So yeah, I got the opportunity to find that, and that's checkered history again. It's been UK tractor, went out to Poland, then got imported back from Poland again, so and I bought it, but it's dead genuine. They're both for genuine tractors, there's no work been done on them at all.
And do you still use them on the farm?
This one we do a little bit when we're draining, we put it on the stone trailer. This is Rob that works for me, he's been doing this one up because when he was a kid he always wanted a Maxim and his dad had a smaller tractor, so he's been doing this one up. So it needs some new tyres and a bit of work doing to it. And then this one, I had to buy it because it was so genuine. It's ex-British Sugar, I used to do all the trial work at British Sugar, so it's never had a night out. But it's just completely genuine, there's no rot on it. Again, it's like 35, nearly 40 years old, but it just, when you polish it and it's not dusty, it looks like it's out the box.
It says here, torque amplifier. Yeah. What does that mean?
I think it just means that you could drop down on half a gear and keep the engine at peak torque, but someone might know better.
And then, wow, look at this beast.
So this,
massive John Deere.
This, when I was born, this would have been probably the biggest John Deere that it made. So I've got a 4955, which is sort of like late 90s, early 90s big John Deere. I've got the 7710, which is like 10 years newer, the sort of the big frame John Deere. Yeah. And I've just bought a 7830, which is sort of 10 years old, big frame John Deere. So the three of them part next to each other look amazing because they're sort of three generations of John Deere. I'm not a massive John Deere fan, but the future classics.
Well, with tractor, usage on farm and people having their favourites, we're big John Deere users on the farm. Nothing runs like a Deere, they say.
And he's got a Magnum up his.
It's really down to the dealership, isn't it? So we've got a very, very good John Deere dealership near us who look after us incredibly well, and that's what we tend to use.
Again, we've got a good John Deere dealership, but we've also got a good Fendt dealership, and we've also got a good JCB dealership, and the Valtra dealership. So we've got quite a mixed bag, to be honest. We haven't actually got the Case dealership anywhere near us at the moment, to be honest, which is a shame.
Well, Ollie, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you. Good luck with the rest of your harvest.
Yeah,
and I'll keep watching on YouTube.
Thank you.
It was interesting going up to Ollie's farm and seeing his harvest in full swing. As farmers, everyone watching this who's a farmer will know that you drive around the countryside looking over the hedges and walls, wondering what the other farmers are getting up to. So for me to go on to other people's farms and find out what's happening is fascinating. And so Ollie has a Claas combine, different colour to this, a green one, and we use New Holland. And this machine was busy working out in the fields for about a month, gathering all the crops into the shed. But now she's been washed off, greased up and put away. This is a very expensive bit of kit. A new combine like this would cost somewhere in the region of £300,000. And we share our machines with a neighbour, and we combine around 4,000 acres over 5 farms. We don't own any land, but managing that scale of acreage means you can spread the cost of these expensive machines. And this now will sit here until July next year when harvest starts all over again. And it was interesting seeing Ollie's vintage tractors of sort of yesteryear. And if you go back even further, of course, before the tractor, we used to use the heavy horses. And you might know about Lexi, my Suffolk Punch, that breed that have ploughed and cultivated the ground of the eastern counties. And of course, you've got the Irish Draft, you've got the Shire, you've got the Highland Pony up in Scotland. All those animals would have worked the land. And a combine harvester is called a combine because it's a combination of a number of different jobs that were done in the past. So in the old days, grain would have been cut, the grain would have grown on the stalks, that would have been mown, often with a horse-drawn mower. Then the grain would have been gathered up in stooks, so still on the stalks with the grain on the top, into stooks, into sheaves, bound up together. They would have been stacked up in great big heaps. And then a thrashing machine would have gone from farm to farm, often driven by a big steam engine. And then those stooks would have been fed into the thrashing machine, and that would have thrashed the grain from the straw. Often the straw would have been used for thatching, and then winnowed, so that all the chaff blown off the grain. So you ended up with bags of wheat or barley or whatever the crop was. And now, all of those jobs are done all at once with a combine harvester. So the cutter bar at the front on the header cuts the crop, it gets fed up into the guts of the machine, it's thrashed, the straw falls out the back, the wind blows off all the chaff, and the grain goes into the tank, into a trailer, and back to the grain store. So let's go and take a look at it all in store. So this is our huge grain store, which has got all the grain stored in it. Now this end is the dryer. So if the grain is wet when it's harvested off the field and needs to be dried down to a certain moisture so that it can be stored for 12, 24 months, then it goes through the grain dryer. And the grain dryer can do 50 tonne an hour. So it's a pretty powerful bit of kit that's run on electricity, but mainly on diesel. And because of the drought and the heat wave, most of the harvest was done in such a way that the grains were dry enough to go straight into store. They didn't need to be dried by our grain dryer at all. So that was a real cost saving. In the first bunker here, but the last crop to be harvested, are winter beans or field beans. So when they're in the field, they're in these little black pods that are thrashed, and out come the beans. Beans are a great crop for the farm in our rotation, firstly because they're a legume. So that means they naturally fix nitrogen into the soil that holds on in the soil for the following crop. So when you plant the wheat after the beans, they use up some of that natural nitrogen produced by the bean plant. But also beans for animal feed are a really good source of protein, and that's where the majority of these go, into producing animal feed. There's a lot of talk now of trying to reduce our carbon footprint in the UK, and that can be done partly by what we feed our animals. And pigs and poultry and cattle and sheep rely on protein for themselves to grow. And a lot of that protein is soya grain that comes from the other side of the world. But if we can grow our own proteins in the form of beans, then that's got to be a good thing. So on this farm, we only feed homegrown beans as a sort of protein to our sheep and cattle. Right, that's the beans. Let's take a look at some of the other crops. So this is milling wheat that is ground up to produce flour to go into bread making. And despite the drought, the yields have been reasonable, quite good on the farm this year. And the heat was just quite extraordinary during July. We had temperatures way over 25 degrees for the whole of the month and peaking at a farm record of 34.7. And with rainfall, there was hardly any. We had about 8 millimetres of rain for the whole of July, whereas usually we would get around 80. But amazingly, the crops didn't suffer too badly, the yields were good, and this year, because of the atrocities in Ukraine and the lack of grain on the world market, prices are quite buoyant. So for us on this farm, arable farming will be profitable this year. So this is the wheat. Just take a look at some of our other crops. This is our barley, winter barley called Merseyside, and this is the barley that we use for producing beer. We looked at it at one of our previous episodes, and we work with Buckham Brewery producing Adams Henson's rare breed, which is a delicious pale ale, I have to say. We also produce spring barley, and that goes into the malting industry as well, but either for lager or for whiskey production. Here we are. I'll test your farming knowledge. Do you know what this is? I'll give you a clue. It has beautiful yellow flowers on the plant in sort of May, June time. It then produces pods that die off and go a brown colour that's harvested in August. And this is oilseed rape. These little tiny black seeds go to our neighbour, Hamish Campbell, who cold presses it. So he had a load of turning presses that squeeze the oil out of these little tiny seeds and to produce rapeseed oil. His brand is called R Oil, and we sell that in our shop at the Cotswold Farm Park, but we also use it in our kitchens for doing all our frying. Rapeseed oil is really good for salad dressings and for cooking, particularly roast potatoes and frying, because it has a very high flash point. It's really good stuff. I prefer it to olive oil actually. And we've got plenty in here, and what it'll do now, we'll just take this 3 minutes down the road to Hamish's farm where he cold presses it into rapeseed oil. So this is the oilseed rape all harvested and safe in the shed, but now the growing season starts all over again. So let's pop out into the fields. When I was on Ollie's farm up near Merseyside, they're close to the sea there, but I didn't see any seagulls. A few wading birds, but no seagulls. And here we are in the middle of the Cotswolds, completely landlocked, and there's hundreds of seagulls. We're cultivating the field here with a set of discs that we've got on trial that's churning up the soil. And what it's doing is lifting worms to the surface, and the seagulls are flying in and being sort of opportunists, really, trying to pick up any bugs and any worms that they might be able to find. It's amazing that you'll see no birds in the sky at all, but as soon as a tractor goes into the field and starts churning up the soil, they just arrive from miles and miles around. So this is the stubble. These are the stalks of the spring barley that's been left behind when the combine pulled out of the field. And now we're churning that up with the discs. The discs cut through the soil and the tines pull it up, and then the rolls behind just crumble it. And what that's doing is creating a seed bed so we can plant the next crop in behind it. What we're doing in this field is a trial. So the two sides we're cultivating, and we'll plant that with the following crop. But in the middle, we're leaving it just as stubble, and what we'll do is we'll direct drill. So we won't disturb the soil at all, we'll just plant the following crop straight into it. And what we'll do with that trial, we allow the crop to grow, it'll come to harvest next August, and then on our combine we have an onboard computer that can measure the yield, and we'll be able to tell whether the cultivated part of the field has a better yield or not than the uncultivated direct drill piece. Of course, what you have to do when you do your financials on that is add in the cost of the fuel and labour and machinery to do the cultivation. And so obviously this is slightly less environmentally friendly as well because of the fuel and energy and the stirring up of the soil that does release some carbon. So there's all of those things to think about, and even though we're farming 650 hectares on this farm, we're doing lots of trials and tests to work out the best way to manage the land, not only the most profitable way to do it, but also the most environmentally friendly way. The soil on this farm is known as Cotswold brash. It's quite light land, which means it's free draining and very stony. It's full of this oolitic limestone. And most of the stones are quite little. They sometimes break up underneath the pressure of the rolls, but occasionally you get big blocks like this that are pretty much rock solid. And if you left these out in the field, that was sitting up, the oilseed rape will grow, it'll cover that up, it'll flower in May when you get those beautiful yellow flowers, and then it'll come to harvest in August time. And the combine harvester comes along with the knives cutting the oilseed rape plant, and if it hits a big rock like that and it goes into the guts of the combine, it can do quite a lot of damage. So one of the jobs is to just in the fields afterwards and pick up any big rocks like this and chuck them on the wall on the side of the field. There's another one over here. With the harvest of 2022 all safely in the shed, you'd have thought that the arable team could put their feet up for a while, but actually it's far from it. There's a quick turnaround and we start planting crops for next year. So in this field, we've spread muck, so manure that'll build up the organic matter in the soil, and then we've planted oilseed rape, little tiny black seeds planted into the soil. And now Ollie is rolling in here. If you look at this ground, it's got a lovely tilth to it to plant the oilseed rape into. There's bits of the muck in there, but it's still quite crumbly and quite puffy. So what he's doing is compressing that down, breaking up the clods to create a firm seed bed. So if we walk over here, you'll see that the ground is now compacted, and those little seeds are pushed in so they're right next to the soil, and now hopefully what we need is some rain and it'll start to grow. And here he comes. You can see that the dust is still flying, even though we have had a little bit of moisture, a little bit of rain, it's not enough. The clouds are building, and fingers crossed we'll get some more, because that's what these little oilseed rape seeds now, is moisture, so that they put down their roots and start to grow.